My name is Jonathan Morgan. I'm here at ACC and I'm going to be pouring a countertop today with Buddy Rhodes countertop mix. I'm going to be using 2 bags of the bone concrete mix to fill into this mold right here. We're going to be doing it with the top up. It's going to be a troweled top. So that's our mold right there. I'll be using this lovely recycled metal right here to use as reinforcement throughout the piece. It's going to end up being about 3 inches thick throughout the majority of the top, and here in the center it'll be 1.5 inches thick, and it'll weigh around 150 pounds when I'm all done. So we'll be adding also a pigment. It's going to be our coal pigment from Buddy Rhodes also, and we've got two mixes of that over there. Nice black color right there, make a nice dark top. We'll be adding that in with the concrete mix as we're mixing it up, and we'll also be adding in some pea gravel too. And that's pretty much it. So we'll see how it goes. So this pea gravel right here, this is what we're going to be adding in with the mix. It's this bucket right here. It's about 40 pounds. The recipe off of the bag of the Buddy Rhodes concrete mix says for the trowel finish to add about 15 to 30 pounds per bag. So I'm just going to split it in half. I'm going to do 20 pounds in each bag, and I'll just use a scale to measure that out as I'm kind of pouring it into the mix. And that'll add a little bit of structure to it and just make it a better top. So here I've got 2 buckets that I'm going to be pouring water into. This is going to be for adding to our mix. Just kind of just filling these about halfway up, and I'll be able to measure it out as I'm pouring the mix and be able to add any more if it's coming out too dry, or just kind of work the mix as I'm going through the whole thing and just kind of tweak it as I go. So as I'm mixing the concrete here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our bag of Buddy Rhodes here, our black pigment, our coal pigment, pea gravel, and the water. And I'm not gonna pour them all in at once. I'm gonna be doing this kind of slowly. If you do it all at once, what you'll end up doing is you'll end up having concrete down at the bottom of the bucket that won't mix together. It'll be down there at the bottom and it won't get any moisture, it won't get some of the dye. So it's better to slowly add all this stuff together until you get 1 full bag's amount into the concrete and mix it as you go. And that way you get a good consistent mix. So this is the bag of concrete right here. This is the pea gravel. Here's our water and our pigment right here. So I'm going to start off with about 25% of the water that is needed. And I'm actually going to measure this out. The bag recipe calls for about 4.5 quarts of water. So I'm just going to go ahead and take 1.5 quarts. There. Go ahead and pour that in. A little bit of our pigment. A lot of people will tell you there's no real science to this. Just kind of touch and go as you go through it. When you're meshing with these pigments, it's real important that you mix them up so you get consistent color, especially if you're having to use multiple bags. Because what can happen is if you do end up with less pigment in one mix than in another, then your tops will come out different colors, or they'll fade as you're going across or in levels of the concrete top. So it's best that you try to mix it as thoroughly as possible and just kind of keep that pigment the same amount for each mix. So as you can see, the mix is coming together. It's nice and black because of that the pigment that we've been adding. It's pretty wet right now. This is not really what the consistency we're looking for, but I'm going to continue to add more and more as we go until I run out of everything I need for this bag. So I'll just keep adding and adding until I get it the way I want it. All right, now I'm starting to add in the pea gravel now that I got a little bit more concrete in there. Using my scale just to kind of try to keep track of how much I put in there. It's about 10 pounds right there. That's about more what we're looking for right there. I mean, more of a, it's about a toothpaste-like consistency. This mix is a lot drier than most concrete mixes are. And looking just like it needs to be, but I still have more to add. So I'll just keep on doing it, keep on getting it the way I want it. So still continuing to add the mix. It's just a long and drawn out process pretty much, and you just kind of try to perfect it as much as you can. So this is about the consistency that we want. Nice and dry, almost like a toothpaste consistency. As you can see, the color is nice and black. It's really mixed together really well. We have our pea gravel mixed in pretty thoroughly, and that's all because we took the time to do it in small little batches and slowly mix it up. What you want to be real careful is on the side here, you can see there's a lot of this dry concrete right here. As you're picking it up, you can see it'll mix in with the concrete and you'll end up getting a coloration difference if you don't be careful and trying to get as much of that stuff off the outside as you can. So just want to be careful of that, just so you get a nice consistent color. So now we've got our concrete mixed, and now we're about to start adding our concrete to our mold. But before I do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this clear liquid release right here. And what that's going to do is it's going to help us be able to pull our mold or our concrete out of our mold. It's going to make it a lot easier. The mold's not going to grab onto the melamine, and it's just going to come out a lot nicer. It's like the equivalent of using Crisco in like a cupcake tray or anything. So it's a great product to use. What I do is I just take a rag, and I'll usually just kind of wet the rag with the release and just kind of rub it all over the place. After you do that, you want to make sure to let it dry a little bit, that way so it'll be an even coat. Also, another thing you want to do is make sure that you get any of the debris, any dust out of your mold, so it's not incorporated in with the concrete, because anything that's going to be in there is going to be mirrored onto your concrete countertop. So the cleaner it is, the better your top's going to be. So I'm going to start taking this concrete right here, and I'm just going to start packing it in all in the corners. Now as you're doing that, you want to be really careful about how you pack it in, because you don't want to do it real loosely. You'll end up with a lot of voids in your concrete, so you want to make sure to be able to pack everything down in those corners. So it's always good to work the wall corners first and try to get as much of that stuff in there as possible. And you never really know until you pull your concrete out how well you did it, so you just kind of have to have faith in yourself and just kind of go with it and see how well you did. But we'll take this and just start packing it in just like that. And just kind of work your way around the mold. So with this mold, this is a pretty complicated mold. I'm using this mold for a countertop for a hallway table that I'm going to be designing for the Texas Furniture Makers Show. As you can see, it's not just a typical square mold. Actually, these walls here come down at a 55-degree angle. Same thing here. And these pieces here in the center represent the actual wooden parts of my table base. So here I've got an 8-inch wide strip that's 1.5 inches thick, and that's how far that wood base will actually stick up into the concrete. Down here in these edges here, this is going to be 3 inches thick, right about there, and then where you see this wooden piece here, the concrete's only going to be about 1.5 inches thick. This piece right here represents the actual leg of my table. It's a cantilever table, so there's one leg that comes up through the concrete countertop. So it's a difficult mold to build, but you know, if you can build the mold, then you can build it out of concrete. It's really, the hardest part is really just getting your mold just right, the way you want it, and a lot of the preparation goes into making sure that this is just right. If If you get it right, all you have to do is put concrete in it and let it do its thing. So, a lot of fun. That's where the creativity comes in. Okay. So the concrete top here is, it's going to be pretty heavy, just like you would imagine concrete to be. I'm using 2 bags of mix, so that's about, each bag is 70 pounds of countertop mix. So you're talking about 140 pounds just in the concrete countertop mix. I'm adding an extra 40 pounds of pea gravel to it. So right about there, we're about, what is that? That's 160 pounds, 180 pounds, and I wish it was 160. But it's definitely going to be heavy. Don't know if that's going to be the exact weight of it. Just won't know until we pull it out of the mold. So now I've filled in the sides here, and now I'm going to go ahead and start filling in the rest of the concrete along the top. I'm going to try to shoot for about 1 inch away from the top. The places I'm really worried about this cracking is all along right above where this wood void is going to be, or this where this wood piece is here. So I'm going to be placing reinforcement right here where my cantilever leg is going to be coming up through the concrete. Right there is where I'm really worried about it. And then also anywhere along here, pretty much where the concrete is going to be overhanging off of the base and just floating. So that's, once I get this here, I'm going to take a screed board and I'm going to try to screed it out and make it nice and even. And then go ahead and place that metal reinforcement about 1 inch away from the top of the concrete mold. And then I'll go ahead and just continue to fill in the rest of the concrete. So I'm making my screed board now. This is for me to go back and forth to level out the concrete. That way that I know that I'll be 1 inch and 1 inch away from the top of my mold. And I'll be able to place my metal reinforcement on top of that concrete and then be able to pack all the rest of the concrete right on top. So I use the table saw to cut this line here and here. That way that I know I have a good consistent flat line. And I made sure that this line is 1 inch away from the bottom. I'm leaving 13 inches here in between these 2 cuts. The width of my concrete mold is actually 16 inches. So that'll give me a good 3 inches to travel back and forth in between the walls of the mold. The important part is making sure that this line here and here is straight. And I'm now going to use the table saw sled to go ahead and cut right here and here, and that way it'll be good to go. Simple as that. Now I have my screed board. I'll be able to use this edge right here to be able to get that 1 inch away from the top of the mold. Once I'm done and I pack the rest of the concrete up, I'll just flip it over and use the other side to screed the top before I start troweling. So as I'm doing this, I'm trying to keep the concrete packed down and just trying to roll it across just so I get a nice even coat. So I'll be spreading the concrete around. Let me put my gloves back on. I'll just be trying to pack it down. Just going back and forth with it, just like this. Trying to keep it flat, try not to pull up too much, but as you can see, I'm pulling up a lot of concrete here, and you can just go back and pack that into the lower spaces right there in the mold, and just keep on coming back over it with the screed board until you get a nice even layer. Okay, now that I've screeded and got my mix nice and flat here, I'm about 1 inch away from the top. I'm starting to add my reinforcement. One thing you want to really be careful about is you don't want your reinforcement pushed all the way out to the edge. That's where you can start having your metal actually coming out through the concrete once you pull it out of the mold. So you want to try to stay about half an inch away from the edges, and that's a pretty safe distance. And I'm trying to space them here about maybe 6 inches apart right there. And then once you've got them in, it's always good to just go ahead and take a little bit of concrete and just go ahead and pack it down right on top of them. That way when you start adding in more mix, your reinforcement doesn't start moving around a little bit. So kind of taking a little handful here and there, just packing it right down into the existing concrete. So the metal reinforcement is important because it prevents cracking in your concrete top. You want it to support that concrete as the weight is being pulled down by gravity. So as it pulls down, the tendency is for the concrete to flex like this, and that's where you end up getting cracks on top of your countertop. That's why I'm very concerned about having my reinforcement right here, because there's going to be a big split of the concrete right there in that mold, and then the edges of my concrete will also be overhanging on the edges of my concrete base. As far as types of material you want to use, there's a couple different things you can use. I'm using metal. This is actually recycled pieces off of an old lawn table that I just kind of cut up. It's wire mesh, maybe about a 16 gauge metal. I'm using this because it's free, and but you can also use ladder wire. You can use lath that's used for stucco. There's also fiberglass that you can use. It gets sold in fiberglass strands. You can use that and actually add it into your mix as you're mixing up your concrete. And from what I understand, that's actually stronger and better to use than metal. You can also buy your fiberglass in a ladder wire form. It basically comes in these long strips, and it's got just little pieces that connect the two rails, so it looks like a ladder when you roll it out. Ideally, you'd want to use the fiberglass, but because I'm doing a trowel top here, I can't do that, because if I add it into the mix, the fibers will actually be exposed on the outside edges of the concrete, and you'll actually see those in the concrete, and that's not what I want. So I went with the gravel and also the metal reinforcement in my top. So now I had to mix up some more concrete. We pretty much filled up the whole mold with that first bag, and that the gravel really added a lot of volume to it. So with the last little mix, I did not add any gravel to it since I'm going to be doing a trowel finish to it. It had filled up so much, and I was only about an inch away, and I still had some left over. So I went ahead and got rid of the rest of that mix, which was just a little bit. I got rid of the gravel mix, and now I'm on to just the countertop mix. This will give me a lot smoother finish. It'll be a lot easier for me to trowel. I won't be fighting the rocks as much, so I won't be pushing them around and creating voids. So this way, it'll just hopefully make a lot better top. When you don't use the gravel, you end up using a whole lot more concrete. So I had to mix twice because I underestimated how much I was mixing, and so I took about a quarter of a bag and mixed that up, and it still was not enough, so I had to add another quarter of a bag. And that's kind of a risky situation because you get into having to add dye in and out, or the pigment, and so that's something that you try to want to prepare for. You always want to mix more concrete than you need. That way you don't come into any problem with coloration or anything like that, or just running out. So matching colors is not an easy process at all. In fact, I've never been able to do it. If you have voids that you need to fill, Buddy Rhodes does offer a paste that you can mix, and that's pretty much what you have to do. After the concrete's been drying for a day, you pull it out of the mold, you let it breathe a little bit, and then you'll take your paste and you will fill those voids. It will be a close match, but it will not be an exact match. So you do the best you can with what you have. That's about it. So now I'll go ahead and start screeding the top here and just trying to get the top nice and level. As you can see, it's coming off a lot easier without that gravel in there. Once again, just kind of taking the excess and just filling in the low spots here. And this is just to get a nice even top here. So you can see a lot of it's coming off. So I'm going to just go ahead and take a lot of this and just throw it back into my barrel, and then I can come back and fill in because I got a lot that I need to take off here. So you can see it just comes off in a roll just like that, nice and easy. You can see a lot of the voids here, and still I'm fighting with some of these rocks. So I'm just going to pull those out and try to fill that back in with nice concrete there. Another thing, you also really want to try to pack it in along the sides. You're still concerned about getting voids on the sides, so you really just want to pat it down and try to get as many of those little air bubbles out as you can. Because that goes back to dealing with the paste too. Any of those voids that are left there on the edge, you're going to see them and you're going to have to fill them with that color. And you really can't bake on that stuff matching exactly. So you just have to do what you can while you're pouring. So once you've got all your concrete in and you're all full, flat, you've got the concrete that you want in it, we're going to start the consolidation method, which basically we're going to use a vibrator here, which is going to be a palm sander. That's what we're using. And what we want to do is we really want to vibrate this whole mold, so I'm going to work around the outside edge. And what that does is it gets all the air bubbles and all the voids on the outside of the concrete and it pushes them up. It just really will give you a better, smoother surface by vibrating the edges, and that's what we're shooting for. So. So what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of taking this magnesium float and I am just trying to flatten out this top right here, trying to use the edges of the mold to kind of be my guide so I'm not dipping down into the mold or into the concrete top too much, and really looking for voids that I can fill in. As I'm doing this, I'm really bringing up what's called the cream in the concrete, which is actually the water that's in the mix. And if you work it too much, what will happen is you'll pull all the water out of the concrete in the top layer, and the concrete will actually dry too quickly. And that's something you just don't want. You want it to be able to go through its process and dry at the same rate throughout the whole piece of concrete. So this area right here has been just gone over with our magnesium float, and this area right here is been gone over with a trowel. And I want to show you the difference in between the two surfaces. As you can see, this is a lot smoother, a lot shinier. The reason that we use our magnesium float here, it'll give us a rougher surface as we're letting the concrete dry and it's starting to set up. So we want this kind of look right now, because once you go over it with the trowel, it pretty much seals that concrete. It brings that water up and it closes all the pores to the top layer of the concrete. Now the water in the concrete is actually trying to come up and it's trying to, as that concrete is trying to dry, if you go over this with the trowel too soon, you will seal the top of it and that moisture will not have anywhere to come up. So that's why we want to work it with this magnesium trowel first and leave this kind of a rough surface to continue to let that moisture come out of the concrete as it's drying. So the difference between a trowel and a magnesium float is the first tool that you use when you're trying to do a trowel finish. And it's heavier, it's denser, it's got the rounded edges on it, and it leaves a rougher surface.
Right, it leaves a porous surface.
And then a trowel, it's lighter. This is made out of magnesium. The trowel is made out of metal.
Steel.
Both
of them are metal.
Oh yeah. Okay. And
Banner. And it's got a slight curve to the when it's troweling over with. Well, when there's no transfer, and that's a really good picture of it right there. This material here, this is regular steel, and this is transfer of material. And if I do this, okay, I'm transferring material. So when I can do that and not transfer that's finished. You can do no more.
Also, while we're going through that whole consolidation process, a lot of these bubbles were coming up through the top. Pretty much we'll just take the corner of the trowel and just kind of try to poke that bubble, release the air, try to go back over it with the trowel and just try to flatten it out as best as possible. So. We're definitely ready to trowel now. Concrete's starting to harden up. We're trying to clean up these edges, and we can already feel that the concrete's starting to get hard, so we're really trying to fight time here and start flattening this guy out. So we flattened it out with the magnesium float now, and we started troweling it with our trowels. And we've worked it now to where we've got a nice smooth surface. And this is the point where we've got it as good as we want, and we want to walk away from it now. We don't want to work it too much. So we're going to walk away, give it about 30 minutes, and come back and look at it again. In that 30-minute time, the concrete will set up a little bit more, it'll get harder, and then we'll be able to come back and really be able to put a lot of pressure on it with the trowel and really give it that smooth finish. So this is the hard part, to get yourself to walk away from it and say it's okay for now. So we're done.